And it's that intrinsic value of saying like, oh, I am the owner of this and I can prove that, right? Like you can think of an NFT almost like a deed.
All right, so I'm excited. We got Sean, aka Mr Wildenfree. We started speaking. What was it, last week through a mutual friend, who Carla, who was talking to me about NFTs and all this crazy stuff that's going on. She's like, "Man, you gotta talk to my friend," and then we started talking. I was like, "Man, we gotta share this conversation." So yeah,
Absolutely.
appreciate you taking the time to speak to me last week, and then also to take the time today.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Peace and blessings, Gabe. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Man, I feel like it's hard for me to remember something that's kind of made as big of a splash in the world of music, or almost in general, in a long time. Where it seems like I'd never heard of NFTs that I could remember before. I don't know what it was, not that long ago, and then all of a sudden it seemed like my whole timeline, everybody, the news, is just
Facts.
everywhere. So it's really interesting
Yeah.
to see, like, okay, how does this apply to music? What's the real value there right now?
Mhm.
How can this be applied? What do we need to understand? So yeah,
Absolutely.
maybe we can get into a little bit of all that. Well, I guess one thing maybe to start with that is like, what happened in the last, like, it feels like the last basically few weeks. Do you know, like, why did it suddenly become so popular or talked about?
So that's a great question. It really just kind of snowballed out of nowhere, because this whole thing has been bubbling up in the background like for at least a year. The
Mhm.
Crypto Kitties, which is one of the main big projects of NFTs, has been around at least 2 to 3 years, right? And that is something that's kind of been having some attention in a niche market, right? Like prices were escalating already just because of the few people that were already engaged. But I think what happened recently is just that all of a sudden, like some of the more popular names, a couple of celebrities might have gotten involved. I believe Lindsay Lohan got involved. There was, I think Tyga released an NFT. Tory Lanez released an NFT. You have electronic music producers like Blau that released NFTs, and a really famous digital artist named Beeple released an NFT as well. And just some really crazy prolific things started happening within the NFT space. And I think that's what made it snowball, right? People started seeing like some really one-off unicorn cases where people are selling artwork for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars.
Yeah, I just looked it up to get the number, but Blau. Here's a headline: Blau sells record-breaking $3.6 million NFT with his. Well, I guess it was his album, right? That he was
Yeah.
selling.
So
That is
funny story
crazy.
about that.
Yeah.
That was actually just the first place winner was the 3 point something million. He
Oh,
he
so it's
actually
more.
he actually took home 11 point something, $11.7 million, I think it was.
Whoa. Okay, so I
Yeah.
basically got the number wrong. That was just one of the multiple
Yeah,
things.
because so he
Wow.
had a auction. It was a competition for the top 33 slots of this auction. And there was ranks for everything above 30, number 33. So within like the bottom 10 of that 33, there was one prize, and then you had another prize for the next five or so. You had another prize for the next few, and then the top prize platinum winner was able to get like a feature with Blau and all of that. So it was a really
Crazy.
interesting competition to see. And everybody in that top 33 was a winner. But of course, Blau was the ultimate winner from having taken home all of that money from those top 33 slots. So he actually won about $11 million from that.
Ooh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Off the album,
Off of
twenty twenty one.
albums, right? So
Man.
so
All right.
yeah,
So,
like
oh, go ahead.
yeah, NFTs, right? So like I guess to kind of introduce that to people so they know what that is, right? NFTs are what they call non-fungible tokens, right? And this is a newer technology or a newer application of the blockchain, right? People are familiar with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies already. Well, the blockchain is the underlying infrastructure that makes cryptocurrencies possible, right? So with that, Bitcoin was the first real use case, right? To say, hey, you can transact using the blockchain, which basically allows for what they call distributed, immutable, and decentralized transactions, right? Distributed meaning that it's there's no one authority, there's no one centralized authority over this operation. Immutable meaning that the security is pretty airtight, right? It's up there. Like every single node in this block has a record of every transaction that has ever occurred. So what happens is if there is one person who is trying to change something and it's not recognized by all of the other nodes on that block, then it immediately gets refuted. So that is what they mean by an immutable ledger. And then decentralized, of course, kind of going back to that first point of, because all of the information is distributed equally all throughout, it's a decentralized platform, meaning there is no one authority, right?
Got it. As opposed to like the U.S. dollar, I guess, which is backed by the U.S. government. Is that
right?
the difference
which
between
is
like a cryptocurrency? Or at least the
absolutely,
part?
Absolutely. So that's a good point, because if we're thinking about the currencies, that goes into a whole other segment of blockchain, which is DeFi, which is actually decentralized finance. And bringing up the money analogy, that's a good one, because you have DeFi and CeFi, which is centralized finance. So centralized finance is what we traditionally experience with the US dollar, right? Which is your central banks, right? Having them be the intermediaries between us and our money, right? Holding that, lending it to other people, making decisions with that money on our behalf, sometimes unbeknownst to us, right? With decentralized finance, there is nobody that is controlling your money without you being aware of it, right? And there is something that is referred to as governance in a lot of these decentralized financial landscapes. Governance basically just means that the people who are involved in the network are the ones who govern what happens with that network, right? So that's a whole thing in and of itself, right? The DeFi and the CeFi applications of the blockchain.
Got it. And sorry, I know you're going on, but just to
No
give the context to myself and everybody else. So DeFi, decentralized finance, Bitcoin, stuff like that. That is really just one, and I guess maybe the first like real use case example of this bigger blockchain technology.
Yep.
Is that right? Just make sure I'm kind of following along. Okay.
Absolutely. So the second real application of the blockchain, right, is what they call smart contracts. And smart contracts were introduced by Ethereum. Ethereum, also abbreviated by the letters ETH, or it's referred to as ETH. That is the second big player in this whole blockchain cryptocurrency space. So you have Bitcoin, which is pretty heavily known, but then you also have Ethereum. Ethereum created this thing called smart contracts, which are basically self-executing contracts that are basically, there's a saying called code is law, right? Where the code itself is the law. It is the executor of that law, right? So a smart contract eliminates the need for any middlemen or any third-party arbitration, right? Arbitration just meaning that something like an escrow, where it's like, hey, you have something you want to give to this party, right? Like A has something to give to C, B comes in and takes, something from both of them and then does the exchange on their behalf, right?
Yeah, it's like you both got your briefcases full of money. You like hand it to the neutral party first, and then he's like, okay, so nobody like hands the other one and runs off. Is that kind of the idea?
Yes, that is exactly it. Yep, that is exactly it, right? So that escrow concept, that third-party arbitrator or mediary, is almost irrelevant with the introduction of smart contracts. Because what happens is you can create this smart contract that will do that execution. And it's very interesting because in traditional contracts, there's no, like, the contract itself doesn't do the execution on its own, obviously, but it also can't hold any of the assets either, right? But with smart contracts,
So with
You can,
so like with a traditional contract, it's essentially a piece of paper that says maybe I promise to give you this money, you promise to give me this thing, but really ultimately I still have to like wire the money from my bank account to your account. You have to give
yep,
me the keys to the house, whatever it is. Whereas if I
yep,
understand correctly, the technology it's literally just built into the contract itself. Is that right?
yeah,
Where it'll
yeah,
actually
exactly.
it'll make that exchange happen. It'll send the money here and send the thing
Yep,
there. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. So the contract itself is the escrow, right? So you can put money into the contract. Once you have created it, once you all have come to an agreement about what this contract will execute on, then you can put money into the contract. They can put whatever into the contract, right? And once everything is verified, it'll self execute within seconds once all of the stipulations have been met, once all of those parameters have been met, right? So that's what a smart contract does. Now, smart contracts are just like one building block. You can think of them as like Legos to all of the new things that are unfolding from this blockchain space, right? Because smart contracts are like the fundamental building block of what we were just talking about in the realms of DeFi and CeFi, right? Those platforms are utilizing smart contracts to self-execute things so that there is no third-party banking needed, right? So with NFTs, right? NFTs are something that can utilize smart contracts, right? But they're a bit different in their own right. So let's go ahead and describe the idea of what fungibility is, right? So a non-fungible token, right, is something that is not fungible. Well, what is fungible? A fungible asset is something like the US dollar, right? If I gave you a dollar and then you gave me back a dollar and it was a different dollar, that would be okay because the value equates. Or if I gave you $5 and you gave me back five $1 bills, that works out okay, right? Because the value equates. But if I gave you my grandmother's watch, right, which was handed down generation after generation, right, and it has some intrinsic, unique value to me, if I gave that to you and then you gave me back another random watch, even if it was the same exact brand, even if it was the same exact style, right? If it wasn't that specific watch, then that's a problem, right? Because there was a unique intrinsic value to that watch. So that is what the concept of a non-fungible asset is. It's something that has unique and intrinsic value. Now, this is the first time NFTs, right, non-fungible tokens, have for the first time introduced this idea of scarcity and collectability to digital assets, right? Because before, if I were to send you a MP3 file to your email, it's like you can send that to anybody else and you would still have a copy of it. I would still have a copy of it. They would now have a copy of it. It would just get duplicated everywhere it went, right? But with NFTs, that's a one of one or a one of limited editions that once I transfer it to you, it's out of my hands, right? Same concept as with the digital money, right? It's like once I transfer this dollar to you, it's out of my hands, right? But with NFTs, this is a unique intrinsic asset. So once I transfer that, it's out of my hands. Now, why this space is booming so much right now is
Wait,
because
I'm sorry.
mhm,
Before you get to that, I do have a question about that, and that we talked
yeah,
about this, whatever it was last week. This was the part that I had a little trouble with, but you did help me through. It
yeah,
was like, okay, I get. Like in theory, yes, you've put this, you've used this technology to say like this. There's this one version, let's say, of this MP3 of this song, right? And
yep,
you are like the true owner. But
hmm,
there's nothing stopping, let's say, that person or the original creator or anybody who gets their hands on that MP3 from putting it everywhere on the internet, right? On YouTube, streaming, like wherever.
yes,
So can you explain? So then, how is it fungible? How what does
right.
that even mean that one person owns it if it still is a digital file that can be distributed everywhere?
Exactly. So these are excellent questions, right? And I think that these are the questions that are coming to the surface right now because so far with the NFT space, we've really only seen um, exercised applications of digital art and not necessarily music, right? Because those are two separate categories of things. Yes, music is art, but in the way that it's handled, in the publishing and the royalties and
Sure.
the
But
collaborations,
even
all of
but
these
even just
aspects
like
make it
visual
difficult.
art, the same thing though.
Hmm.
They can still post that the picture of that digital art everywhere.
Okay, right, true.
So then
So
maybe
to
if that's
that
a
regard,
easier, yeah,
yeah. So explaining it even with the digital art, right, for the visual elements, there's a theme within the NFT community right now, with the ethos of the environment, so to speak, is that anyone can see it, one person can own it, right? So it doesn't really matter to the collector who gets to see it, right? Like it's kind of almost like you can Google and save as many images of the Mona Lisa on your hard drive as you want, right? But you don't actually have the Mona Lisa, you know? And it's that intrinsic value of saying like, oh, I am the owner of this and I can prove that, right? Like you can think of an NFT almost like a deed, right? Like or a title to a vehicle, right? It's like, no, yeah, I have the asset, but I can prove it because this specific hash, which is just a string of letters and numbers, right? It exists in my wallet and I can show you verification of the time that it was purchased from the original artist, right? And you can see that it exists solely in my ownership. So that is a part of the ethos of the NFT community right now, and what
yeah.
I think will kind of continue moving forward.
Yeah, no, and I that kind of makes sense. And I think what I'm starting to realize is that it's like yes, anybody can duplicate that digital asset, whether it's an MP3 or visual art, whatever. And to me, it's still like yeah, I get the Mona Lisa thing, but there is still one physical copy, so it's like slightly
Hmm.
different.
Right.
But I think what it really is that you ascribe that value to it because there is only one of this thing, and we've all agreed essentially there is this technology backing where it only exists once, in this network, in this marketplace. Even though it
Yep.
can be distributed everywhere else, we all agree, well, there is only one here, so that's the value it has, which it's kind of like going back to the US dollar, we all
Yeah.
agree that this piece of paper has this value. It's really
Mhm.
mostly because we agree, right? And then there's
Exactly.
then it becomes sort of this, I don't know, self-perpetuating cycle, I guess, wherever it's like, okay, we all agree this is worth this. You start trading it. Now you own this. So I think that was kind of the missing piece for me. It's like, okay, well, we just all agree like that this is,
Yeah.
valuable or as valuable as we decide it is based
Yep.
off people bidding off it or whatever. And then at least in this one place, in the, I don't know what it's called, the marketplace, the network, on the
Right.
blockchain, I guess, we can actually prove that there's only one there. And so
Yeah.
therefore we say, hey, this is the collector's edition. This is the one. And so this is the one that has all the value. We can all look at it. We can all enjoy it, whatever,
Hmm.
does that sound about right? Am I starting to
Yeah.
wrap my mind around it the right way?
You are. You are. I think that you're grasping it pretty correctly. And what I would say is that the so with Ethereum, right? Ethereum was the first one that introduced this concept of smart contracts and allowed for NFTs to be created, right? So it's kind of interesting that you're talking about this agreement, right? Because that is basically all it is, right? An agreement between people that something has value. And Ethereum is just one blockchain of many, right? Like there are different blockchains, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, you have platforms like Polkadot, and there's a couple of others, right? I don't want to get too into the thick of it, right? But think of this, you have completely independent blockchains, and now you have new ones forming that have their own smart contracts that can create their own NFTs, right? So they kind of operate in a completely different marketplace. Just think of this as being in a different country with a different currency, right? And the value of that currency might be different than the value of this currency over here, right? So already you have people talking about NFTs being built on different blockchains and feeling as if they don't have the same type of value that an NFT does if it were built on the Ethereum blockchain, right? So I think it's interesting that you're grasping this concept of like the agreement aspect and how that may influence the pricing structure of this technology, or not even the technology, but the assets we're producing with this technology moving forward, right? So one thing I would say about it is that let's look at the Blau situation, right? Blau made 11 something million dollars off of an NFT sale, but he's been in this space for about 3 years. He's really been like intent about doing NFTs, and he's done another NFT release a bit before that, but nothing like this one. He put a lot of effort into the delivery on that, right? It wasn't just a digital asset that he was providing an experience. He was providing an opportunity to actually connect and meet with him. He was providing other assets or other opportunities for his community, like getting like exclusive access or backstage access to some of his events, right? So you have all of these different things that you can ascribe to this NFT when you sell it, which can then influence the value that people see out of it, right?
Yeah. No, this is great.
Yeah.
So, okay, because the more I learn about it, I guess just like music or marketing or anything else, the more you realize, okay, there's levels to this. Like you can go as deep down the
Yep.
rabbit hole as you want and probably study this your whole life and always learn new stuff, and it's going to be always evolving and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm glad that you brought Blau back up because yeah, maybe we can get into sort of some of the specific use cases. Like, okay, I'm a musician, I'm a producer, I'm an artist. You know, I don't know if maybe we can get a little deeper into either what Blau did, or I know you've got your project coming up, or what other people have done. Maybe can we get into some like, all right, cool. So you geeked out a little bit. I kind of get it, but like, what? How do we use this? How do we apply this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that there's no right or wrong way to apply this, right? People have had some tremendous ideas. I've been on Clubhouse, which is that pop-in audio chat application. Really
Love it.
fascinating. Love being in there. Love talking with people and connecting with people. And I have heard some astounding ideas utilizing NFTs, right? We had spoke before, I believe it was Illmind that released a beat pack as an NFT,
Yeah,
right?
like
So
a
that's,
sample pack. Yeah.
yep, like a sample pack as an NFT. So that's one idea. I have seen people just genuinely releasing a full album or a single as an NFT, right? I've seen people trying to release a song, but providing all of the copyright accessibility with the sale of the NFT, right? So saying, hey, I made this song, but I'm giving it to you and you have full access to reproduce it, recreate it, like do whatever you want with it. So that's very interesting to see happen. And you've also seen the opposite of that, right? Where people have said, yeah, like I'm selling you this NFT and you have exclusive rights to listen to it for a certain period of time, but I still own the song. I'm still going to have it on streaming services at a later date or something, right? But you're just getting that opportunity to be that first serve, like you're the first person that gets to experience this. So again, there's no real rules to what is the right and wrong way to approach this. It's really how far can your imagination stretch this idea to come up with really awesome ways to serve your fans and your audience.
Wow. Okay. Crazy. So, so one, I guess, what would be like a basic one? Maybe saying somebody gets early access, or what are you doing with your release? Maybe you can walk through that.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So with my first NFT release, which I've been preparing over the last couple of weeks, is I'm going to be releasing some lyrical performance art videos, right? I wanted to keep it simple initially, right? Because I was coming into it assessing what's happening in the digital art space of NFTs, right? Like initially you see people just uploading the randomest things. It can be like a really shitty GIF. It could be like a recreation of like a Mona Lisa or some type of Warhol painting, but in their own style. You can see people doing something that was really like just, oh, okay, I kind of ripped off this idea and kind of switched it up here and just kind of tossed something out there. But you're seeing people get sales on that. But then you see people who are genuine at their craft, have been at this for years. People have been developing 3D art skills, working in Octane and Unity and all of these different 3D platforms, creating some incredible art, right? And now it's showcasing 3D art as like an art itself, like something to be revered in the same light as something like a Mona Lisa, right? Or a Van Gogh, right? Because now it has the scarcity factor, it has the collectability that 3D art could have never had before, right? So now it's being perceived in a new light and held to a higher regard. So with my release, I wanted to kind of introduce my music and my lyricism in that same capacity, right? Because I believe hip hop deserves to be heralded in that same regard, right? I believe that the dexterity, the tonality, the delivery, right? The inflections, the everything that I'm doing with my voice and the writing, the poetry, the prose, right? The metaphors, all of that deserves to be acknowledged and reviewed and to be looked over in that same vein as a classical art or some of these newer, really pristine art pieces that are being sold. So for my first piece, I really just wanted to have a video of me performing this art piece, of me sharing my lyrics, of me sharing my artistry, and letting that be my first statement piece, right? Typically when a artist has released their first NFT ever, it is called their Genesis piece, right? So this would be my Genesis NFT. And I wanted it to kind of be that statement of, yes, this is my artistry. This is what I do. I am a lyricist. I'm a hip hop artist. And this is what I want to be acknowledged for, right? Yes, I can do some really cool visual effects. Yes, I can maybe have somebody or collaborate with an artist and do some really crazy 3D art stuff. But I want you to see this and acknowledge me as the hip hop artist that I am, first and foremost.
Dope. So, and that's interesting too, the Genesis piece thing, because my guess is it creates another thing where probably as you grow in popularity, probably owning a piece of that Genesis piece, just like any other, like a rookie card or something, is
Yep.
probably has greater value than maybe
Yep.
another release.
Absolutely.
Which is there's
And
not that kind of that's a new thing really for music, or maybe it's yeah, I
yeah,
think it is a new thing, right? Because there's not
yeah,
really an equivalent to that.
yeah. And so here's why it introduces a brand new thing to the secondary market totally, right? Whether it's visual art or music, right? This is something that has never before happened in secondary marketplaces with collectible assets, right? The original creator of an NFT piece of content actually has the right to add a royalty to that artwork, right? This is something that we're kind of familiar with in music because when we put music out and it gets streams, we get royalties off of it. But this is completely new to the space of artistry in general and art collectorship, you know? Because now when an art collector buys that Genesis piece or that whatever piece of artwork from an artist who is on the rise, the more acclaim that artist gets, the higher value that original piece gets, right? And if they ever decide to sell that piece, then the artist can now have a percentage of that secondary market sale, which is unheard of. That's unreal.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it almost so first one thing it does it almost brings back to keep it in music. It kind of brings back like this concept of you can do like a collector's edition vinyl or CD or whatever, and say, hey, we're only printing 1 or 100 or 1,000 of these. Um, so it kind of creates that in the digital space, which is cool. But then that's really interesting because what this means is that you can say, okay, cool, we're gonna release this, and then
Yeah.
my fans, my audience gets a chance to buy this. It's a collector's item, it's pretty dope. And also now there's going to be this secondary market where other collectors might be interested, in like, damn, you got one of 100 copies or single copies of Mr Wildenfree's first project or whatever,
Yeah.
Genesis project. And then, so for one thing, it adds value. It makes the buyer, the audience, even more excited about buying it because it's something that might not only be something they're excited about having, but also can actually make them more money in the future because it could increase in value. But
Yep.
then, because it's embedded in this smart contract, you can say, okay, well, every time somebody resells it, I get 10% of that sale, right?
Yep. Yep.
That is
Exactly
pretty
that.
cool. That is
It's
crazy.
wild. It's wild, man. And it's so cool because like you never know how much that secondary market sale is gonna be, right?
Right.
And that 10% royalty could end up being double or even triple what you initially got for it, right? Like imagine like, oh, I just sold like, oh, okay, you sell your first NFT for $500. Yes, right? But then imagine that same piece goes on sale for $50,000 in the next upcoming years. You just made more money than you did on that original sale from somebody else selling it, right? And that's really awesome. But I think the real the value there comes with the artists remaining diligent in their craft, right? Continuing to grow, continuing to develop their artistry and getting themselves out there, right? That's how those original pieces start to become these saplings, right? Like that just kind of grow into these money trees. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
mhm,
and it's a great point too, because I think anytime there's a new technology, a new concept that we can apply to our music, our marketing, our business, anything like that, it can be kind of like the shiny object, like, oh, this is, this is how I'm going to get rich. This is going to be great. But like a lot of times, it still always comes back to those fundamentals, where it's like,
yep,
okay, yeah, you can release this thing, but unless, like you said, you continue to grow, the value's not going to increase. Unless, this is
yep,
something you mentioned last week, is like talking about the process of releasing it, of like making sure there's this story behind it. And
hmm,
I heard you talking about it, and I was like, oh my god, this is so, this is some of the basics that we talk about, when we're teaching
yeah,
music producers, musicians, and stuff about how to market themselves. Like the story is
yeah,
what makes it valuable. Show them the behind the scenes, explain why you're releasing this music, or why you're releasing this beat pack or the sample pack, or doing this live event, whether it's virtual or,
yeah,
or otherwise. The story behind it is where the value is, and it doesn't matter if you're using blockchain or you're selling traditionally or whatever. That part of it is like that's just human
yeah,
nature, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And so with that, right? Because I think that with NFTs, being in this new space, creating with a new asset class, right? Like this is something fundamentally different than what we've been working with before. There is a difference, like the fundamentals of the marketing is there, yes, and it's the same as what it's always been, right? But I think that there is this immense pressure release, right? Like a relief of sorts when an artist like myself and anybody else who gets involved in this space starts to recognize that this is a whole different ball game, right? In the sense of I don't have to get my music heard by millions and millions of people every month just to earn minimum wage, right? Like I don't have to do that with NFTs, right? With NFTs, if you have one of something and two people want it, you are effectively oversubscribed, right?
Mm.
Like there's literally a book named Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley that I've been reading. I literally I listened to it as an audiobook, right? And as soon as it was done, I immediately ran it back and I just continued to listen to it ever since then because it's really drilling in a really meaningful and impactful message in the sense of marketing and owning your craft and having something to offer to the world, right? With understanding that concept of being oversubscribed, it makes a whole lot more sense within this NFT marketplace because you literally can go from having nothing to being quite comfortable if you just have two people that genuinely want and appreciate your art, right? That's literally why Blau's project went up to 11 million something dollars, right? I mean, he probably would have got that 3 million, maybe 6 million easily with just two of those two people that were in what they call a bidding war with one another, right? And that's why this kind of mechanism works within the NFT space because now it's like, again, if you have that one thing and two people want it, they're going to keep bidding on it to outbid the other, right? So
Mm.
now
Yeah.
that price is just going up exponentially without a real foreseeable end to it until those two people have decided, okay, this person got it, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
it's dope. It's
it's like
like the ultimate version of the thousand true fans concept, right? Which is
yes,
sort of this old concept that gets referenced a lot, but it's so true. Which is essentially if you have 1,000 true fans, people who really they love you, they're gonna buy the album, they're gonna buy the beat pack, whatever it is that you're putting out, they're basically gonna buy it no matter what. And so if you
yep,
have 1,000 true fans and they spend just $100 a year, You make $100,000 a year, you can live,
Yep,
live your life. So it kind of takes that
exactly.
to extreme where like it's funny, but it's true. I guess you could literally technically have two fans.
Right,
I mean, maybe in practical terms,
right.
it might be a little more
Two
expensive for them to cover
collectors,
more.
right?
Two
You
collectors.
yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe that's
Two
another
like
level than
well off.
true fan.
Exactly. You get 1,000 true fans and two true collectors. You get that's it. You good.
There we go. That should be the next article. Two true collectors is
There
all
you
you
go.
need. But yeah, that's super dope. And by the way, you dropped like a little gem right there that I do too, where you said you listen to that book and then you re-listen to it. I do that all the
Yeah.
time. Where like to me, I'd rather I think sometimes there's almost like this pride of like, oh yeah, I read 100 books this year, and it's like that's great, but like, how much did you really take it in and then really apply it? And to me, like, there are certain books where I mostly listen to books also listened to
Yeah.
or read, five or more times. But I'd rather
Yeah.
do that and really take it in, really be able to apply that than just being like, oh yeah, I've heard 100 different books and kind of vaguely remember the concept. So anyway, that's a gem right there.
Absolutely. a
That's
hundred
that's good.
percent, bro. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Um,
It's so awesome.
So as far as like next steps, if you're a producer, you're
Right.
an artist,
Hmm.
if you want to get into this, like I just started to click around on some stuff
Right.
recently, so I'm like super
Yeah.
super beginner, but it is a
Okay.
little confusing. There's like all these different wallets and all these different marketplaces. Where
Yeah.
do you start? Like if you want to, I guess either start to look at where you can buy the stuff to kind of see it, or if I'm a
Yeah.
musician putting out a release and or a music producer putting out beats or something,
Hmm.
where do you even start?
Okay. So that's an excellent question. And getting started can seem a bit daunting, especially if you've never dealt with cryptocurrency before. If you have dealt with cryptocurrency, this is a little bit easier because you're already familiar with the concepts of a digital wallet and loading money onto that digital wallet and utilizing it. But if you're brand new to the space of cryptocurrency, the first thing that I would say is get yourself one of these digital wallets, right? Something like MetaMask. MetaMask is the most popular digital wallet. This warm, like wallet, I believe they call it a cold wallet. Cold storage is something hardware, right? And then a hot wallet, warm wallet is something that is on your computer, software, right? So a MetaMask is a great starting point. So download that. You can get it on your phone. You can get it on your browser extension, right? Like if you're using something like Chrome or the Brave browser, you can get it there. From there, what you'll want is an access point for your funding, right? Like if you're trying to load money into this wallet, then you would most likely have to use a platform like Coinbase, right? Coinbase is a pretty easy exchange platform where you can connect it to your bank account and you can just go on there and say, hey, I want to buy a half of a Bitcoin or I want to buy half of an Ethereum, right? And you can just put in however much money you need to onto this wallet. And then once you have that digital asset, you can go into the settings and then say send, right? And then inside of your MetaMask, you have an option to receive, right? And you can receive Ethereum and it will give you an address, right? It's this really long string of numbers and letters. Don't let it, make you feel overwhelmed or anything. Just easy copy and paste it, right? So copy that into the send address, right? Send to address from your Coinbase. And then once you send that money, now you have a funded MetaMask wallet, right? So then from there, with the space of NFTs, you have at least 9 or 10 different marketplaces that I can think of, right? Like think about like miniature Amazons of the NFT marketplace, right? So you have platforms like OpenSea, which is an open platform that any artist or any creator can go on and start creating NFTs with. You have Rarible, which is similar to that OpenSea in the sense that any artist can go on and start creating. Then you have some of the more curated platforms. You have Super Rare, which is super rare, right? In the sense that they have an application process for artists to get involved. Same thing with Maker's Place, Known Origin. You have Mintable app, right? Which I believe is also open, like OpenSea and Rarible. And then you have, what is it? Foundation and Zora. So Foundation and Zora are invite only platforms, right? So these are marketplaces where you as an artist get invites to invite other artists to the platform. So you kind of have to know somebody that has an invite available in order for you to get started on those platforms. So you can kind of pick and choose, right? Oh, you also have Nifty Gateway. Nifty Gateway is one of the really, really big ones as well. And they also have an application process. But you can basically pick and choose from here, right? If you want to get started super soon, then go for one of the open platforms like OpenSea, Rarible, or Mintable app, right? If you don't mind a bit more of a curated space, then you can go for the invite-only apps like Foundation and Zora. Or if you feel like you are an artist with a pretty robust portfolio already, and you already have a name, you already have a huge following, then you can most likely apply to platforms like Super Rare, Maker's Place, Known Origin, and get approved for them, right? You'll probably still have to wait a while. Nifty Gateway as well, right? You probably still have to wait a while, but you'll have a higher likelihood of getting approved, right? So once you're on these platforms, it's really easy to sign up because it'll just ask you to connect to your MetaMask wallet, right? And you just simply click a button once that extension is loaded on your profile on your browser, and you just click a button. It'll ask you to confirm the connection, and then you're pretty much set up on their marketplace. All you do is kind of input your username or whatever that you want, and then you can go through the process of minting NFT. Now, there is another platform called IPFS, right? And IPFS stands for the Interplanetary File System. This is essentially like the blockchain's Dropbox, so to speak, right? So now you have asset storage, digital asset storage on the blockchain. So you can use a platform like that to host the content that you will be uploading as an NFT, right? So that your assets have a distributed, decentralized, and an immutable storage space, right? And then you upload it as an NFT to the blockchain. Now, when you go through this process, it's what they call minting, right? Minting an NFT. So you have two options on certain platforms. Certain platforms may only give you one option, which is just a one of one. But then you also have the limited edition option or multiples option, right? This gives you the option to say, hey, I want to release 20 editions of this piece of artwork, right? In doing so, right, you allow 20 people to have access to that one asset, right? Versus just the one of one. So that is the decision that you'll have to make when you initially release when you mint your first NFT. Now, across all of these platforms, you have something that is known as the gas fee, right? And a gas fee is essentially the transaction fee that is necessary for your asset to be minted to the blockchain, right? There's an excellent website called txstreet.com, which is like transaction street, txstreet.com, which kind of shows in like this really like South Park themed visual, right? Where you have buses that are lined up and about to depart, right? And the buses at the front are the ones that will get onto this blockchain the fastest, right? And obviously the buses that are further back are the ones that will get there slower. So this is a nice visual representation of what actually happens when people pay gas fees, right? Because what has happened lately is that these transaction fees have gotten enormous. People are paying anywhere from $50 to $100-something to mint one asset on the blockchain, right? It can get really crazy, especially in like when periods are congested, right? When you have so many new artists and so many new people trying to create new virtual assets on the blockchain. So with that, they have it where kind of like similar to a gas station, right? Where you have like your base 87, you got your plus, and then your premium. Like they have it like that, where you have a slow, standard, and fast option for your gas fees, right? So the standard option is what you would typically see, which is still probably somewhere around $45 to $100, depending on what time of day you go. But you have an option to speed that process up by paying more in gas fees, or to slow it down and pay less in gas fees, right? So doing that is risky, because if you end up trying to pay too little, then you may never get a seat on that bus, if that makes sense, right? And then ironically, you would have to pay gas fees in order to cancel that transaction. So you got to be mindful about trying to go too slow when it comes to processing your minting, your gas fee. But after all of that's said and done, once you have decided on your piece of artwork, you've uploaded it to IPFS, which is the Interplanetary File System, and you've connected it with this marketplace, and you've made sure that you've kind of put in all your details for your NFT, and then you pay the minting price, then your product is officially live, and then you can start marketing it just like you would any other album or product that's for sale. So those are the big things.
Okay.
Now, I mentioned the gas fees, but there are two websites that you can go to get what they call lazy minting, right? Which is kind of like free for you gas fees. OpenSea has, like, you pay one time for the initial gas fee to create a collection, and then every other time you add a new NFT into that collection, it's free, right? So that's a good option for those that don't want to be paying a large lump sum in gas fees every single time they create a new asset. And then you also have a platform like, Mintable.app, right? Which allows for you to create free NFTs, or free for you NFTs by lazy minting, which just means that the person who buys that NFT from you will be the ones to pay that gas fee.
Oh, okay. Got you.
Yeah.
Got it. So that's one of the ways that you can get around some of those upfront costs that are there.
Yep.
And then once it's on that, marketplace, where it's OpenSea, and it's SEA, right? OpenSea.
Yes, SEA. Mm-hmm.
Once you're on one of those Mintable, Wearable, one of those, now that's where people can go. They can bid, just like they did on Blau's project, just like they'll be able to on your project. And you can either say, like you said, hey, we're only doing one of this particular thing, or we're doing 10 or 100 or 1,000 of this particular thing, whether that is, what were the things you mentioned before? Early access, even getting copyright, if you don't mind just going back through those. Just,
no worries.
People have those ideas.
Yeah, just to spitball some more ideas, right? And kind of go over the ones that we mentioned, right? Giving away the copyright, right, or the licensing opportunity, right? So that can be something that incentivizes people to buy this NFT from you. Giving, like, or doing the opposite, right? Having a limited release so that they're the first person to hear it, right? But it is something that will be coming to streaming platforms, and you as the artist still own all of the copyrights. So that's an option. You can do the, I believe it was the Illmind method, right? Releasing a sample pack, or releasing the stems to a song that you've released. You can even do something like an acoustic version or an unheard version of a song that is released, and you can do that as an NFT. You can do, like, you can actually do physical things too, right? Like if you wanted to sell an NFT, and whoever ends up owning that NFT has the right to, like, a vinyl record or something like that, right? You can do a one-of-one print of a vinyl record to provide them once they purchase that NFT, right? So there's all sorts of really interesting things that you can do with the music and that purchase of the NFT.
Oh, man, super exciting. There's so much, like I said earlier, it's like you can, go super deep into any one of these multiple areas, but it's pretty exciting to see what, where it's going to develop, and some of the stuff that can already be applied.
Absolutely.
man, I think we'll probably wrap up pretty soon here. But what's if people
Yeah.
want to go check out, your project, people want to check you out, where can they find you?
Oh yeah, I appreciate that, man. So I go by Mr. Wildenfree. That's MR Wild free. And you can find me on all social media platforms at MR Wild My website is wildenfree.com. I have music on all major streaming platforms. So you can kind of find me at that same name there as well. And I'm working on releasing my first NFT project. I was debating on releasing it with Foundation, but I think I might go with another marketplace called Portion, but we will see. I will definitely make sure that people know where that will be released on my social media channels. Um, and Twitter is most likely the place that I'll be making frequent announcements about my NFT release as it approaches. So same handle there as well, MR Wild Free. And yeah, that's primarily it. And if you want additional resources and to understand the NFTs a little bit better, then definitely check out OpenSea. That just Google search NFT Bible, and the NFT Bible will pop up, provided by OpenSea, and it'll give you the whole rundown on what NFTs are, why it's important, how to transact with it, how to make sense of it. So that's a really useful resource.
So, man, you are a wealth of knowledge, and it's
Thank you,
it's
bro.
just it's great to hear you talk about this stuff because I can tell how excited you are about it, and just
Oh
seeing
yeah,
all the possibilities and everything. Sean, Mr. Wildenfree, appreciate you taking the time.
absolutely. Thank you, Gabe. I appreciate your time, man. Peace and blessings.